Hello, I'm Joan Landis. I'm really glad to be with you again today. Today we're discussing errors of thinking called cognitive distortions. Cognitive just means to do with your mind, and a distortion just means you're kind of bending it out of shape, right? So let's think about what some of the common cognitive distortions are, thinking errors, that can kind of get us into trouble. Now, Aaron Beck and David Burns came up with some of the most powerful and the first suggestions of cognitive distortions, and so we need to give them credit. But you know, there's a lot of them out there. So let's talk about some of the most common ones first. One of the first ones is filtering. Filtering means that just like a sieve, you know, it catches certain things and won't let them go through to your mind. So filtering means, for instance, that you don't pay attention to any of the good things in your life, and the only things you allowed into your mind are the bad, depressing, terrible things, okay? And in any situation, there's both good and bad, right? But someone who has the cognitive distortion of filtering really only filters to let the bad stuff in. So that's when you don't want to have. Another one is polarized thinking or black and white thinking, and that's where it's kind of all or nothing. You know, you're either a saint or a sinner. You're either a winner or a loser. And you know, you don't ever do anything halfway. If you're going to do it, you're going to be the top one. If you can't just get a piece of furniture. You have to redecorate your whole house. And so that's a place where you really don't want to be, because it makes you have very rigid thinking. And so it makes it so that if you aren't complying with everything on the one end of the spectrum that you really want to do, you just give up. And so black and white thinking is kind of a mess too. We really don't want to do a lot of that. We want to understand that the mature mind, a mature adult mind, has the capacity for looking at gray areas. And that's actually very, very good for your resilience, to be able to be resilient and see the middle ground. Another one is overgeneralization, and that's where overgeneralization is where you take like one event and you generalize everything about it. So you see a person and they're kind of loud and raucous, and you say to yourself, oh, they're just a total, they're just a total jerk. They just are an extrovert, and I don't think I'd ever be a friend with them because they're just way out there. Well, maybe they were a little bit drunk, or maybe they were just celebrating something and it was a super great event, and that's really not how they are 24/7. But someone who overgeneralizes will often do that to other people and to themselves, So for yourself, it would be like, oh, I failed at that, I must be a failure, right? Instead of, okay, so I failed at that one thing, but that doesn't make me a failure at everything. So that's overgeneralization. Another one is jumping to conclusions. And that's where you just assume that you know what the outcome's going to be. Or, and so jumping to conclusions is very dangerous, because it can kind of become a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? And and the problem is also that you don't really allow people and events to unfold naturally. You will give up, or, you'll just assume things, and that can get us into problems where we aren't proactive anymore. And so jumping to conclusions is something that you want to look out for and make sure you're not doing that too much. And that's also kind of like telling the future. That's almost a little bit like that too. Another one that is kind of everyone's favorite, not everyone, but a lot of people's, is catastrophizing. And that's where you make a catastrophe out of something that isn't. You make a mountain out of a molehill, right? And so, for instance, your husband loses his job, and you're like, we're going to starve to death, we're going to be homeless, right? That's catastrophizing, instead of, okay, well, we're going to have to really, cut back on things for a while and start looking for jobs, right? So can you tell that catastrophizing makes us much more reactive and much less resilient? And so catastrophizing is a cognitive distortion that we want to eliminate too. Another one is personalization. Now, I don't know what it is, but women tend to do this a lot. I don't know why, but I don't think men do this nearly as much. And that's where, when something happens, we kind of make it about us. And so someone walks past us without saying hi, and we're like, oh, they must be mad at me. Or, one of your kids acts up and you're like, I feel like a bad mother, right? And so that's personalizing things. Instead of saying, hey, things happen, it's not necessarily all about me. I am not the center of the universe. Now, adolescents typically, and children typically do this a lot. The world is all about them. People are looking at them, people are judging them, people are living their lives because of, what they want to do for and against you. And that's just not really even close to reality. Most people are just busy surviving in their own lives and they're not trying to be out to get you. So personalization is really good to get over and be able to just understand that not everything is about us, okay? Another one is a kind of a control fallacy, and that's where we feel like that our lives are not in our control, that other external forces are controlling the outcome. And a lot of substance abusers really do this, where they blame things on external circumstances and they say, that person made me mad and so I needed to go use, or, that person gave me a really great deal and so I needed to go use. And so that's kind of a control fallacy where we think that our lives are controlled by external forces. It's like, I didn't get into graduate school because the graduate admissions team was really, biased against me. Well, is that really going to help you be resilient and proactive? The answer is no. The answer is we need to, take responsibility and feel like that we have control over our lives and so that we can actually move forward. Now, there's some interesting research about that. There is some research that, and I'll cite this at the bottom of the at the bottom of the screen, but it says that if we don't feel that we have self-determination, we actually give up ambition and we aren't as proactive and we're not as hopeful about our life. So if we want to be resilient, we want to stay with this mindset that says we are the master of our destinies, okay? And that helps us to have more hope and proactivity. So this control fallacy that says the external things control us is not a good place to be. Now, the flip side of the external control is the internal control, which basically says that I can control people. If I just nag them enough, if I just, put them on enough programs with enough reinforcers, that I can control everybody and everything around me. This is not a good place to be either. So we need, again, that gray area, that middle ground that keeps us resilient and proactive, and we don't want to be sucked into control fallacies. So another fallacy is the idea of fairness, okay? One of my friends says, fair is where you go to see the pigs. There's really no such thing as fair in the real world, because fair is simply a personal construct of what it means to you. It's like the idea of beauty, right? And so everybody has a different opinion of what beauty is and what fairness is. And so if you feel like everyone in the world is supposed to conduct their lives in according to your idea of fairness, which is probably super biased in favor of you, you're going to be walking through life feeling like you're really robbed and really wronged. So this is not a great place to be if you want to be resilient. Don't buy into this idea that there's a universal law of fairness out there and people are not abiding by it and they are screwing you over, okay? Just realize, hey, we all do the best we can. The whole point is we want to be loving and we want to be, accomplish things and we want to have a great life. But fair is a construct and a cognitive distortion that can really get you hung up for a long time. So we don't really want to go there either. Another common one is to blame, right? Just blaming other people. And that's kind of like, again, that external control fallacy where, you're the one that made me do this. And the problem with blaming is that when you make other people responsible for your pain, then what happens? We are not, I love that word responsibility, because it means we are able to respond. If we are not responsible, if we're not able to respond, then we are a passive victim in our lives. if somebody else is responsible for our pain, then we can't do much on our own to fix our pain. We look out there and say, you are the one that did that. So I like that saying that says, pain is ubiquitous, pain is everywhere, but suffering is optional. And part of what we do with Resillified is help you develop the skills to understand that, sure, pain may be out there, people will do bad things, no question, but I do not have to spend my life suffering, and that's a choice. And so the blaming thing puts us in a bad position of not being able to take control of our life, be resilient, move forward, even though bad things have happened to us. We kind of sit on our hands and just blame people and waiting for them to make the first move to make our lives better. That's a bad place to be. Okay, so another one is saying to yourself, I should do that, or I must do that. I should do this, I must do that. And that kind of, one of the reasons that's a little bit of a cognitive distortion, it's not a horrible one, but it's kind of subtle. And it basically says that you don't really have too much agency or too much choice in the matter. I kind of have to do something. I have to do this, I should do it, I must do it. And that, number one, takes the joy out of life because it takes the choice away from you. But what we should do is we should grab our choices and agency, take responsibility for things and say, I choose to do this. That is my choice. And suddenly you're more powerful, you're more empowered, you're more resilient, instead of, oh yeah, I've got to do this, right? And so that idea of should is kind of a powerful one that we need to just notice and maybe get away from a little bit. Another one is emotional reasoning. Wow, I think we do this a lot. And that is that if I feel a certain way, that means that's how it is, right? I feel sad, so the day must be yucky. I feel anxious, so the world must be a scary place. And so the emotional reasoning is one that we just need to notice and get away from so that we're not painting the whole canvas of the world by our feeling of the moment. We just need to say, wow, that feeling, it's a feeling. Feelings come and go. It doesn't mean really anything about my world. It means more about me than it does the world. Another one is labeling. Wow, this is one I see a lot. We label things. When we label things, it's a way that our mind actually feels more in control of something. And so most of the time that can be a problem. Once in a while we actually use that clinically, and there will be times in Resillified that we really will label things. But often it'll get us into trouble. Because once we label someone and put them in a box, then that's the halo effect. That's the paradigm that we use. Those are the lenses that we see them with. Those are the colored glasses that we see them with that label. And we may not really actually see something or someone for who they really are because we have such a powerful label about them. So if we have a mother-in-law and we label her as, really controlling or really needy, that's our label for her, then pretty much everything that she does will feed into that lens that we use to interpret her actions. And she may actually have many times in her life when she's not needy, she's not controlling. And yet that's not how we see her. We don't give her credit. And it can actually really impact relationships negatively. So just notice in your mind when you label people. Now, the reason we label people is that we kind of stereotype and label people because it makes life simpler for our mind, right? We don't have to look at all the complexities. We just say, oh, he's a dumb jock. Oh, she's, she's just a really flaky whatever. And so we understand where it comes from, but notice when you do it because it can really get in the way of your actual relationships, okay? And then the last one is kind of the fallacy of heaven's reward. In other words, this idea that if you suffer and if you give up all this stuff and, really stress yourself out, that there will be some mythical reward in the universe that's going to come back to you, okay? And that can get us into trouble because then we start keeping score and we start feeling really ripped off when it doesn't happen. So what we want to do, instead of thinking that, wow, somehow, the universe is going to reward me for this, you need to say, hey, we do the best we can, and it may come back, it may not. I'm not going to get hung up on that. I'm going to do what's right and what's healthy because it's right and healthy, not because some future reward is going to somehow come down upon me. So anyway, I hope this is helpful to you. Of course, there are many more cognitive distortions out there. You can go on the internet and get other lists. This list was from Psych Central, and I really like their site. They do a lot of really cool things. So what we'd like to do for your action item this week is to just look at the list of cognitive distortions and just notice things that maybe you do. Maybe you've got one or two favorite cognitive distortions that you do. Just notice them and start telling yourself, wow, I don't want to do this as much. Let's do something else. And think of ways that you can do something different with those thoughts. And then for sure, get on the forums and share with us what you discovered about yourself and what you'd like to overcome. So anyway, I hope this is great for you. It was fun for me, as always, and we'll be in touch soon. Thanks. Bye.